How do I switch from hard power to soft power? When I was in government, I had hard power. I had resources to allocate, access to the White House. I don't have that kind of power anymore. Across the country, every week in 2022, 17,000 people became homeless for the first time. Our system is not funded at that capacity, but I started working at HUD in the Bush administration, Bush 2. Very often, Congress would appropriate more money than the Bush administration asked for the homeless programs. It is curious, we're putting money into the homeless programs, but not actually putting more money into all of those things that actually could fix the systemic affordability crisis.
We're still maintaining, not solving. How do we change that?
I think that we have to do a mix of things. You and I have talked about
Ann Oliva is the CEO for the National Alliance to End Homelessness. Ann has been working to prevent and solve homelessness for decades. This is a great podcast. Make sure to send it to everybody you know. When did you start at the National Alliance?
a little more than 18 months.
And I remember you texting me, and I'm sure you text other people, and you're, putting out the feelers, should I take this gig?
Yeah.
And
I asked you.
We talked about this. It's such a big ship.
Yeah.
With invisible people, I make a decision and I have a meeting with myself and I change.
And it gets done. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have to move this big organization. What comes to mind, though, because I first met you when you worked for HUD.
Yes, that is correct.
Has your views of homelessness changed running National Alliance? And I know homelessness has changed, but you in this position, looking at it from the level that you see.
Yeah, it's a good question. And obviously, we have the field has evolved. I started at HUD in 2007, but that was not my first job in homelessness. I was at the community level. I worked in technical assistance prior to that. And every time I take a new position, my point of view has to be a little bit different. But the bulk of my time was in federal government. And my view was very specific to the job that I had to do. I was a federal regulator. I was also a leader in the field, but I had limitations that come as part of being a federal employee, right? And it took me a minute to figure out how to maneuver when I don't have those kinds of guardrails. Let's just call them guardrails. And so, yeah, I think that my point of view has changed. My point of view around federal policy and my position, like how I'm positioning myself around federal policy, it's all changed because I have a different job now and the field has evolved. So I evolve and I also have a different job.
What have been the biggest challenges, but also things that are miracles that you saw, wow, we changed this? People that lead organizations coming into this organization like you did are probably wondering, how did you steer the ship? Yeah. And what were the challenges and what tips can you give and how did you see change as it was happening?
Yeah, I'll stick to sort of the last year and a half-ish to answer that question for the moment. And I would say that for me, switching from a mindset that was specific to like, what is the government's role in doing this work, to a mindset of how do I switch from hard power to soft power, I think is probably the easiest way to say it. When I was in government, I had hard power. I had resources to allocate. I had regulations. I had access to the White House. All of those things are hard power. And now I'm maneuvering in an environment where I don't have that kind of power anymore, but my influence is different. And how do I wield the power that I have and the influence that I have in order to get what I want, right? Or to get what the field needs, or to get what people experiencing homelessness need.
To move the National Alliance in the direction that it needs to go in.
That's right. And so, there's the internal discussions at the Alliance with the staff and figuring out how the staff is motivated, understanding what the team needs in order to be as effective as they possibly can at what they want to do. It's a really mission-oriented team. They're young and they're motivated and they want direction, right? They want to know how they can have an impact in the field. And also, then there's the external. How do I navigate relationships with other national organizations, sometimes like yours, sometimes like the Law Center, or sometimes like the National Low-Income Housing Coalition? How do we navigate that or work together to create some collective impact when we can? How do I navigate my relationship with the government? Because a lot of the people that I served with are still there or are back. So all of those relationships kind of have to get renegotiated when you are in a different position. Like I just, like switched over. And that's been interesting and a bit of a challenge.
What I've seen, looking from the outside, National Alliance was this legacy organization, if you would.
Mm-hmm.
And homelessness was changing, but National Alliance wasn't changing. And you came in, and I'm sure the change wasn't fast enough that you would want, but you've been able to change it in the direction. You're doing things that I don't think would have happened years ago before you.
So I will say that I'm a different kind of leader, right? And the organization is, as you said, it's a legacy organization. We're 40 years old. We have the things that make us strong also make it hard sometimes to shift as
Right.
the environment shifts around us. And I think that, when Nan decided to retire, in part she saw this shift coming and thought that it was time for somebody else
I
to
never
take
thought of it like that.
Oh, I mean, Nan's pretty smart.
Well, no,
And
I agree. And that's pretty smart of her to do that forecasting.
Yeah. And, she left me in the very best possible situation, like financially and operationally, that I could have been in to take over an organization of this kind and of this magnitude. I've been able to use those resources that she left me in order to maneuver through this changing environment. But like you said, it never feels fast enough. The environment is changing faster than I think we can. And I don't mean we, the Alliance. I mean we, the national organization, sort of as a whole.
All
It's
of
really
us.
hard to change that fast. But what I'm trying to do is to build a roadmap and a structure that will allow us to pivot when we need to grow in places when we need to retract when we need to. And that's not easy for an organization our size.
Well, it's not. You said from your opening keynote that you started as an AmeriCorps Vista.
I was a Vista. I was not an AmeriCorps. I'm old enough that it was not AmeriCorps yet. It was still just Vista.
Okay. What was your position? What did you start? 'Cause
Yeah.
those are volunteer positions, right?
That is correct. So I got a small stipend. I lived on $600 a month. I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I worked for the Women's Housing Coalition there. And so I did a lot of things. It was a small direct service organization. I changed the locks on on the apartments when they turned over. I raised money for them. I did a lot of grant writing. I developed a
Wow.
training program it was a program really for women who were transitioning out. Most of our families were survivors of domestic violence. So we did a lot of job training so that folks could, be independent. And so I developed a job training program for women in
Wow.
construction.
As a Vista Corps, because often Vista Corps are interns, but they put you in positions where you could do some cool stuff.
I had a boss who I'm still in touch with. Her name is Angie Ludi. She
wow.
is in Albuquerque. She's in the New Mexico Women's Hall of Fame for the work that she did in New
wow.
Mexico. That gave me a lot of latitude and I served with a friend who is still one of my best friends to this day. And she gave us a lot of latitude to figure things out and figure out like what our talents were and how we wanted to not just learn in the job, but also build the capacity of the organization. Because VISTA volunteers, unlike AmeriCorps volunteers, VISTA volunteers are capacity builders.
Okay.
So that's why I did fundraising and program development under Angie's leadership.
So that was a long time ago.
Yes.
Homelessness was so different back then.
Yes.
How have you seen homelessness change?
Homelessness back then, at least in Albuquerque, I mean, I worked in a family program. It was women with kids, some single women, but mostly women with kids. A lot of survivors of domestic violence, a lot of indigenous women because I worked in New Mexico, a lot of Latino women. But it wasn't as visible back then. I served in 1992, 1993. It wasn't as visible like it is now. We didn't have big encampments in the city of Albuquerque. We didn't have and we didn't have a ton of resources. But the Women's Housing Coalition was about housing. So Angie understood that if she could get housing, she could help women exit from homelessness. She understood that connection.
And that foundation has stuck with you?
That foundation has stuck with me all this time. And then when I left Vista Service, I moved overseas for a little while. And then when I came back, I worked in Washington, D.C. I was the 6th employee of the first continuum of care in the country.
Oh, wow.
And I grew up professionally at the Community Partnership in Washington, D.C. Like that and the Women's Housing Coalition like ground the work that I've done for the rest of my career.
Then you went on to HUD.
I did do something in between, though. I left the Community Partnership in the early 2000s, and I did technical assistance. One of the jobs that I did was technical assistance for Hurricane Katrina, and I spent a week a month for 2 years in New Orleans and in Louisiana and Mississippi trying to rebuild homeless systems that had been devastated by Hurricane Katrina. And that also was pretty influential for me. It was a learning experience. I started to understand the intersections, race. I saw it in Albuquerque, but in New Orleans in particular after Hurricane Katrina, like the intersection with race was just so profound. And the way that housing intersects with homelessness, the increase in chronic homelessness in New Orleans, I think it was like 2,000%. It was a ridiculous increase in chronic homelessness. So all of those things helped me understand also the connection between federal policy and what happens at the local level. And when I went to HUD, Mark Johnston, who was my boss, he recruited me to go and run the SNAPS office. So first I was the director of the Office of Special Needs Assistance Programs.
Wow.
And then I became the Deputy Assistant Secretary.
What's that like? And I don't mean that I mean, there's challenges of bureaucracy and everything, but in the frame of homelessness, and like I started, how you view homelessness at the National Alliance, and I know homelessness changed. How did you view homelessness working as HUD? And I know you're smiling. And one thing I know you do that I always say with, everybody that's an executive should be out on the streets. I always say a certain amount of time, but you do it.
I do.
Yeah. And so how? Because I can't imagine working at HUD, and I'm not saying that as a bad thing.
Yeah, it's the hardest job I ever had. In part because, like, for a long time, and probably still now, the money that goes through HUD, the Continuum of Care program and ESG, except for a couple of places like New York City and Los Angeles maybe, and a couple of others, it's the backbone of our entire homelessness response system in this country. And the level of responsibility that I felt, both to the country and to my own staff, was pretty intense. And I lasted 10 years. It was, like I said, sort of the most challenging job that I ever have had. And I suspect that it will be until I die. That will be the most challenging job that I've ever had.
The first time we ever met, and I don't think we met otherwise, passing in the green room, we were at a speaking event, and you were before me. And then, I remember being introduced to you, and I'm like, I'm speaking with somebody from HUD. Taking the stage, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's like you're doing the local Kiwanis, and then all of a sudden you have, you're on the stage with somebody from HUD. And then we were at a True Colors.
I remember exactly what you're talking
You
about.
know
At the
where
True
I'm
Colors
going.
event. Uh-huh.
You bitched at me
I did.
because I was critical of HUD, and
And you tried to get me to join Twitter.
yeah, and my response was, I say good things too. Like I did on the stage today, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And you go, yeah, you do. And we've kind of connected since then.
Yeah.
How do you see the state of homelessness today?
I've been at this for 30-ish years. And this is one of the most challenging environments that I have ever encountered professionally. I think 2024 is going to be not just pivotal, but really hard for us, for our field, for people experiencing homelessness, for everyone. We have a number of very big things happening this year, including a presidential election, including a Supreme Court case, but also what's happening at the local level and the lack of affordable housing. And that's not going to get fixed overnight. All are just making people's jobs much harder, and it's making life for people experiencing homelessness much harder. Part of my job now is to try and keep folks who are in the field motivated to keep going because we need them. You and I had a very what I would call a somewhat tough conversation after this conference last year. I don't know if you remember, but you told me that our conference was boring, and you also gave me needed feedback on my opening session last year. And I was unhappy. You might have also remembered that I was in the lounge crying after the opening plenary. And I thought about it a lot between March and July when we did our next conference. And what I didn't understand, I was, less than a year into the job, I didn't understand my role in setting the tone for people. I still had a government mindset, right? That's a different orientation to the work. Yeah. People need to see a leader who's going to say the real stuff, but also give them some hope and give them some motivation and give some positive energy so that they can go back and do the stuff that they need to do. And I did not do that in March. And I really had to do some okay, I got that wrong. How do I move forward and do the thing that the field needs me to do in this moment? Because it's just hard right now. And folks are feeling it.
They're feeling it. I haven't been doing this as long as you. And I started out as a homeless person. I was on the streets in 1994, and there was no encampments. It was totally different. The 3 hots and a cot still worked, even though that's like a 1940s model, 1950s model. It still worked in 1990 a little bit. We're just starting to go into the housing thing. And, then my only path out was going the church route because I lived in a church for 7 years. Nobody should live in a church for 7 years unless your name is Pope. Then I got involved back then when I was working as a family case manager, which is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Homeless kids, homeless seniors just drag your heart on the ground.
Yep.
It was hard, but there was always hope. You would have this success story, and you would look at tomorrow. That is harder to find the hope anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I've done direct service, although I have bounced in my career from national or federal down to local, back up to national and federal, down to local, because I want to actually know the impact of my decisions. But I would say that what I'm seeing in the field from frontline staff is less hope than what I experienced myself or what I've heard from folks in the past. And it's because it's just so hard. It's hard to access housing. People have been outside for a long time. They're sicker. The Alliance did a video on Frontline staff not that long ago. And one of the lines just has stuck with me. I don't remember anything else, any of the other words in the video, but one of the outreach workers says, I have a hard time turning my phone off because the worst things happen to my clients after I am done for the day.
Wow.
That's what frontline staff are worried about. They're worried about their folks. They're worried about their own stability. They're not getting paid enough. Like, there's a lot
Right.
riding on them.
There's a homeless youth organization here that I've talked to, wonderful organization, that has trouble keeping staff because they can't afford to live here.
That's right.
And they can't afford the transportation cost
Yeah.
to take the train or the bus or to drive here. And the turnover is crazy.
And the turnover isn't just impacting the staff, it's impacting the people who are experiencing homelessness because they have no stability in who's helping them. They have to keep telling their story over and over again. Like, that
Right.
lack of continuity is really adversely impacting folks who are seeking help.
One of the things that I look at in my own life, and I wish I could give these experiences to everybody, being homeless and then working in the homeless sector, you can see that it's not that nonprofits don't want to help. There's barriers to help. Mm-hmm. And it could be a staffing issue, mm-hmm. could be turnover, it could be bureaucracy, it could mm-hmm. be lack of resources, on and on and on.
Or all those things.
And so often advocates, and sometimes it's just, I'm not saying nonprofits are perfect, mm-hmm. nobody's perfect. But so often I see service providers being blamed for things that they don't have any control over.
Yeah, for systemic problems.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Even criminalization.
Yeah.
I have seen in Los Angeles, and I get why people are frustrated, mm-hmm. right? They're upset. And I have seen advocates take out their frustration on people that cannot fix criminalization, and they didn't,
create it to begin with.
They didn't, right, exactly. They have no power to, fix criminalization or even to, pass the laws to criminalize.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's easy to try and put the blame on the homeless services system or an individual provider. But the problems that we have right now are not actually about the providers. I mean, obviously, like you said, not every folks aren't perfect. There's lots of whatever. But the problems that we have to fix right now around affordable housing and access to services and systemic racism and marginalization of people with disabilities and LGBTQ people, those are systemic problems that cannot be fixed by an individual provider. They have to be fixed at the system level.
Could you ever imagine the level of criminalization that we're seeing now?
It's shocking. And I say it's shocking because for a long time...
Invisible People is a nonprofit media publisher working to change the story of homelessness. If you can, please become a monthly donor. And together, we can make a difference. Could you ever imagine the level of criminalization?
It's shocking. And I say it's shocking because for a long time, I worked in an environment where it was frowned upon, regardless of how people actually felt personally, it was frowned upon to openly hate people experiencing homelessness who are seen as vulnerable, right? And that shift to open hostility to people who are experiencing the most traumatic thing that in their lives is shocking. It shocks me every day. And it probably shouldn't because I've been around the block a number of times, but it shocks me every day.
How could people even do this to other humans, much less think like that.
Yeah, it's appalling. And the divisiveness, the fact that homelessness is being used as a wedge issue at the very local level, all the way up to the national level,
On both sides.
on both sides, but more on one
Right,
side
yeah, it's
than the
definitely
other.
leaning.
Just to be clear.
Yeah, it's definitely leaning.
Yeah, it's leaning.
Yeah.
But, there was not that I was a huge fan of this administration, but I started working at HUD in the Bush administration, Bush 2. And very often, Congress would appropriate more money than the Bush administration asked for the homeless programs. Didn't matter whether it was a Republican Congress or a Democratic Congress, they would appropriate more money because they saw it as their moral imperative to do so. And I don't think that moral imperative has carried over to where we are right now. Although this year's budget, if it passes the way that it is, there's a lot of problems with it, but at least they put more money in the homeless account.
It amazes me, and one, we're criminalizing, but then we're going to put more money in to help solve it.
Well, here's the thing is that, like, at the federal level, homelessness on the Senate side, both the Democrats and the Republicans put more money into the homeless assistance grants account, in part because they believe in those programs. There's a lot of data about those programs. They know the staff who run those programs. And so there's a lot of evidence that those programs are helping on the ground. And that helps sort of as we move forward. Susan Collins has been a huge supporter of homeless programs for a long time and still has an impact on the budget. But it is curious. It's curious that we're putting money into the homeless programs, but not actually putting more money into the voucher program, or not actually putting more money into the home program where we need to put money, or the low-income housing tax credit program, like all of those things that actually could fix the systemic affordability crisis.
We're still maintaining, not solving.
Correct.
How do we change that?
Oh, well, if I knew the answer to that, I would have already done it, Mark.
We could all retire.
We could all retire. I think that we have to do a mix of things. You and I have talked about, like, the kind of messaging that we need to do. We actually need to get more people to weigh in on our side and understand some of the dynamics that we're talking about here. We need to continue to educate people who run the appropriations process. But we also, everybody needs to vote. Right. How about that? And we've seen at the state level, I think that there's been a little bit of a vacuum in terms of, like, what happens at the state level that is not doing us any favors as a field right now. And for example, there's bad legislation in a number of states, and I think that we have to, like, really, really educate folks, and we have to do the messaging in the right way, and we have to, like, pull all of these pieces together to make sure that we're as strong as we can be. But a state like Minnesota, they voted. They have some of the biggest housing budget in the country that was appropriated so that they can actually start to solve the problem. And my friend and colleague, Jennifer Ho, who I served with in the federal government, is their housing commissioner. So, like, who's in power makes a difference. Yeah. And I think that we need to draw those lines for folks.
I don't think I updated you. We're going to Hennepin County.
Fantastic. That's good.
So as a follow-up to Helsinki.
Oh, good.
And we've already had meetings.
Yeah.
One of the things that really drives me crazy about narrative change, this false belief that we're doing this work to get wealthy, like we want homelessness to increase. And I get the public sees, California spends billions of dollars and there's more homelessness. What they don't see is what was said today. For every person that's helped out of homelessness, 3 new people. Right. And so there's more money being spent, not because homeless services is doing worse And yeah, there's places we can improve, right? The homeless industrial complex, and it's usually the homeless criminalization. I mean, the criminalization industrial complex people that are pushing that.
Yeah.
But
That
that
drives
is
me a little bit bananas as well.
right, and I don't know how to educate that one,
Yeah.
right?
It irritates me
Because
because
we're doing better than we ever have.
we are doing better than we ever have. Like, there's only so much you can do systems improvement. Like, there's only so much systems improvement you can actually do, right? Before the system is just optimized, and then you either need to add resources or you need to reduce the number of people that are in the system, right? And HUD's data, when they released their longitudinal data for 2022, our analysis indicates that across the country, every week in 2022, 17,000 people became homeless for the first time. 17,000 people
Every
became
week.
homeless every week in the year 2022 on average. And our system is not funded at that capacity. It is not funded to be able to handle that kind of inflow.
Right.
So we got to ask ourselves as a nation, like, what is happening? How is it that we went from, something that was much less than 17,000 a week to 17,000, and be honest about rent spikes, COVID pandemic protections sort of ending or running out of money, our social safety net. All of those things are impacting those numbers. And the fact is that unsheltered homelessness among families went up.
Right.
There's kids living in RVs and tents. Homelessness among seniors is through the roof. Like, it's a very quickly growing population of people experiencing homelessness for the first time. Is that who
I
we want to be?
I was speaking in Manchester, New Hampshire, and I had mentioned that when I visit a shelter now, they look like nursing homes. And a street nurse came up after, and she thanked me for saying that. And she
Yeah.
said one of our biggest problems is when we get a senior into a shelter is finding an outlet that the bunk bed is by first, if it's a bunk bed, it has to
Yeah,
be
for their
lower because they
oxygen.
get it, but it has for oxygen they need to be by an outlet. So how do you keep hope?
Well, I try and get out like you. I get out into the field as much as I can. So I try and go visit programs, look at things that are working well, talk to frontline staff, all of those things. I think that's the easiest way for me to get my batteries recharged, is to actually be in the field and not just inside the Beltway in Washington, D.C. Because people who are on the front lines, they'll tell you the truth, but they'll tell you the bad, and they'll tell you the
Right.
good, right? I also think that for me personally, getting out and doing outreach when I can, that's my favorite. As you know, that's my favorite, direct service kind of thing to do, is to do outreach and just talking to people, connecting with them as human beings. It just helps me focus.
The National Alliance offers a lot of training for service providers and nonprofits.
Yeah.
What kind of training do you offer, and how do people find you and find the training? How do people find the training?
Yeah. So our website is endhomelessness.org. You can also type in NAEH.org and it'll take you to our website. We have the Center for Learning, which is our online training materials. We offer, bulk registrations so if a whole community wants to do a set of trainings on a specific topic, we offer discounts for that sort of thing. We have a YouTube channel, which we just launched not that long ago, or expanded not that long ago. We do on-site training and technical assistance with communities. So there's a variety of ways that we interact with communities, and we never go in and tell people what they're doing or what to do. We go into a community and walk alongside them, figure out what the environment is that they're working in and then help them navigate how to make things more evidence-based or how to navigate tough political situations, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we do a lot of different things around training and TA.
One of the things that you brought up YouTube. Whenever I go and look at what other people are doing, the competitors, if you will.
Yeah, we're not a competitor.
No, I know that, but you're allowed to. There's certain software that allows you to put other people in there, and obviously, Invisible People is kicking ass.
Yeah.
HUD is second. HUD is, and for the federal government and they don't do it right, but they do enough right that they get significant traffic.
There's 2 studios at HUD in the building, at least 2, if not more. I've been in 2. There's one in the secretary's suite or on the secretary's floor, and there's one in the basement. So that
explains some of it.
Doing videos at HUD is actually pretty easy.
And they made a commitment to it, and that's where I was going, and I wanted to encourage you. Because everything is on video anymore, right? Yeah. It's how we communicate. It's what I'm still trying to transition our written news. There's a place for text-based news, but I'm trying to transition it to video. Like even myself, I'll look for something hits the news cycle, and I'll read something, but then I look for a video on it. Mm-hmm. And it's just because it's easier for me to consume that media and learn.
Yeah.
If you had 3 wishes, what would they be?
I don't know, like world peace, housing for everybody, racial justice.
All good ones.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thanks for having me, Mark.